event. And for this particular event, what we've done is we've put together, I think, what's going to be a very interesting topic for us all to discuss, especially if you're in enterprise software, in terms of ultimately breaking into the enterprise. Just as an introduction for everybody, my name is Mike Creedon. I run the Accelerate program that's hosting us tonight. And we're very proud that we're in cohort 7 right now with 10 amazing companies. And it's great for us to be able to have many of our alums as well coming here, being on the panel as well, but also in the audience. So that's great. So hopefully everybody will enjoy themselves tonight. And remember, right after the panel, we're going to be breaking out. We have some good networking, and hopefully you can get to meet each other and some of our speakers as well. So with that, what I want to do is introduce now our moderator, Hannah Mandapat. And you can take over. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. My name is Hannah Mandapat, and I work on the App Exchange, where I lead a marketing team that is focused on bringing in new partners, new ISVs to our ecosystem. So if that applies to any of you, come see me after this. But in talking to a lot of these partners and aspiring partners, a question that I get asked often is, how do I know it's time to break into the enterprise? When do I know when I'm ready? So I'm excited that we're going to talk about that tonight. So I'm going to kind of stop talking, and I'm going to introduce our experts to the stage. So if you could all please welcome our panelists, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves as well. But no, you should totally clap. Yes, like absolutely. All right. Yeah, let's sit under our pictures. Okay. Great. Well, why don't we start off and just go down the line and tell us who you are, what company you work for, and a little bit about your experience in selling to the enterprise. So, Max, you want to start?
Yeah, my name is Max Rodman. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. Max Rodman. I'm the CEO of Prodley, which is a Salesforce ISV. We're working on the problem of building a better admin experience for enterprise apps. This is my second company, actually. My first one was a company called Steelbrick, which was acquired by Salesforce, became Salesforce CPQ and Billing.
And Wendy?
Hi, thanks. Hi, I'm Wendy Gonzalez. I'm the COO at Somasource. So we are a company that focuses on building ground truth training data for enterprises who are trying to bring AI products to market. So that's our primary focus. We right now have about 25% of the Fortune 50 in terms of our customer base. And we are introduced through Salesforce because they're actually an investor of ours.
And I'm Ray Hine, CEO and founder of Propel PLM. Product Lifecycle Management is a big enterprise category. This is my third go around being in partner network with Salesforce at a company called Vendavo, early on Aptus, and now this. We're 4 years old, and we're Series B at our stage right now. Entered into the enterprise this past year, and Salesforce Ventures is invested in us, and I think we were in cohort 1 here as well.
Great, thank you all. So let's just jump right in. So when did you all know it was time to make that jump into the enterprise? So Ray, I want to start with you. You mentioned you've built and had a lot of companies in the Salesforce ecosystem. What were some of those important milestones or key attributes of your company when you were getting started that signaled now it's time for us to move into the enterprise?
Yeah, that's a great question. The category, product lifecycle management, like I said, you've got CRM, HCM, PLM. It's a $15 billion category. So you have companies like Oracle, SAP, PTC, Siemens that are the big dominant players. I was with Agile, which got bought by Oracle back in the day. And frankly, that's what we're doing is we're building a new version of what was 20-year-old legacy and moving into the cloud. So what Workday did to PeopleSoft, what Salesforce did to Siebel, we're doing in the enterprise PLM category. So the trigger for us really was focusing on live, happy, referenceable customers in small to medium and getting divisions of large global companies at more mid-market that might be 100 to 200K in a company that's a large global enterprise. And then getting our name noticed and getting the brand out there that we had referenceability. And then all of a sudden we started getting RFPs from large global companies that came in inbounds. And that started to trigger that our name was there, we might have arrived. And then probably the biggest trigger was back earlier this year, one of the largest computer companies in the world was out looking for a next-gen system, and we got pulled into a into a bake-off RFP with one of the large global SIs. And the top 7 big companies that have been in this space, we all competed for that business, and it hasn't been awarded yet, but we came in 3rd, and we recognized that we were ready to play in the enterprise. So in the last 9 months, I'd say we've got probably 30 to 40 of the largest companies in the world now starting to reach out to us. And that was the trigger point, was really, I think, those things. GSIs recognizing us, some companies with the inbound RFPs, and being able to compete really well at the feature function level and the brand level with great references.
Great. And Max, you mentioned, you've done this quite a few times too with the ultimate kind of testament as you selling, Steelbrick to Salesforce. So what were some of those signals, again, in the companies that you founded that showed that you were ready to move to the enterprise?
Right. Well, for us at Steelbrick, I mean, the biggest trigger was Salesforce buying us, to be frank. But, I'll give maybe a slightly different answer. I think arguably, in our space in CPQ, it was all enterprise, right? It was all, and that was the big problem, frankly, that we set out to solve. CPQ was too hard, too expensive to deploy and maintain, so only the biggest companies could afford it. So we wanted to democratize CPQ. And so by building it on Salesforce platform, but more importantly, making it declaratively configured, clicks, not code, right? We're able to do that. So I had long resisted the urge to go to enterprise, and I mean, that's how we built the business, right? It was a kind of a mid-market, solution, but that's what differentiated us, because everybody, Aptus and others were all going for the big boys, and I think that was a big part of our success, and ultimately it led to a better product, right? Because you can't solve a lot of the problems that you would normally kind of throw services resources at, right? With enterprise deals, right? When you're selling to mid-market or SMBs, you have to solve them with a product. And that, I think, is what made for a better product ultimately.
Right. So we've talked a lot about, what are those signals, what are those triggers that, indicate that your startup is ready to move upstream. But how do you get ready for that? So Wendy, I want to start with you, specifically in the area of building credibility as a startup. So what are some of the things you did to get ready to make that move to selling into the enterprise?
Well, we had a sort of a similar situation to where we initially focused on really going after SMBs. So we got ourselves to about 12, 15 or so customers, to where we then started seeing success. We then went out proactively, so in conferences and things of that nature. And the reality is while we were actually going for it versus sort of avoiding it, we did land our first big enterprise through a conference connection, because we'd established a bit of a reputation. And the world is small amongst data scientists, right? People go from one company to another. I think the interesting thing about that is that we weren't actually completely ready, to be frank with you. And the thing that was really one of the bigger lessons learned from that was that the number of buyers, the number of decision makers that it really takes to make those decisions, it may seem straightforward, but there's a lot of complexity that happens behind it. And what was interesting is we felt we were ready. We felt we had a great product. We got there, and some of our challenges actually came into delivery. So that was an interesting learning.
Yeah, and it's interesting, that you say that you weren't quite ready, but Ray, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this. Could you remember what was that kind of first big enterprise deal that you landed as a small company, and how did you get ready for it?
Yeah, excuse me. The big thing that we hit was we saw it coming, and we looked across the organization and said, everybody in the teams need to look at their own organizations and determine what readiness means. CSM, sales, legal, everything. You go through an enterprise deal, and all of a sudden you're spending 2 weeks negotiating, and every paragraph's redline in your MSA takes a heck of a lot. So we invested heavily in the organization to look at every process, and we just said at an OKR level, look at it, operation key results, look at enterprise readiness, and have each functional area focus on that. I'll just kind of inject on the good, bad, and the ugly a little bit with this too. I think the big lesson that came out of it was, you're selling to SMBs, and your sales teams and your CSM teams know how to do that, but the sales motion changes. And so although we're a 4.5, 5-year-old company, I'm on my 3rd head of sales, and he's the guy that can sell into the enterprise. The guys that are your early stage people probably aren't the guys that are going to get you to the enterprise level. And you have to be prepared to make those changes and up level and switch up.
And you mentioned, the title of this panel is The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. So this is something I'd want all of you guys to weigh in on. But what are some of those lessons learned, right? There's obviously a lot of great success stories. You guys are all here today. You have had success, selling in the enterprise. But what are some of those things that maybe we're not thinking about? Any of the mistakes or lessons learned on that front that you want to share with the audience? And Max, let's start with you.
Yeah, I mean, for us, particularly at Steelbreak, it was, very much about sort of, the product and quote unquote scalability, and, what's interesting, like I always found this interesting, right? It's not that these big companies really have requirements that are all that different, right? The big difference is they're a lot less flexible, right? With a small guy, you can just, smaller customer, like, okay, we're not going to do a 20,000 line quote, right? We'll just do it in a spreadsheet. That happens 3 times a year, right? And the big guys, the big enterprise customers, they're like, well, no, you got to give it to me, right? I don't care that it happens once a year. I want it. So that's the big difference, right? So you just got to be ready for that, and there's just, a lot less flexibility, and they're a lot more demanding. And frankly, that's the reason that I, sort of ran the company for a long time to stay out of the enterprise, right? Because if you're not careful, it can capsize the ship, especially for a small company. So, I agree with Ray, right? You need to have the product, at a point where you feel like you can start tackling him, and more importantly, have all the other infrastructure around it, the services, legal, the engineering capacity to then work on these, feature requests that are inevitably going to come, and they're going to demand that they be done today, or tomorrow, not a year from now.
Wendy, any lessons learned from your end?
Yeah, I think that I completely agree with what Ray and Max had shared. One is absolutely be ready, and to be over prepared is a good thing, even if that shiny carrot is right in front of you, where there's this huge. I think really taking a step back to recognize the complexities, and ensuring that you're ready and saying no when you need to. That's probably one of the biggest lessons learned of that first challenge. But I think the other thing too is to recognize that the sales cycle is different. So it took us a little while to figure this out, but we actually went forward with customer segmentation. So when you have an SMB, yes, maybe they can get the more standard or vanilla rate card, if you will. And how you both sell, but how you deliver. We found ourselves in a situation to where, just as Max has said, enterprises all need you to conform to their process, right? Whether it's their sales process, their procurement process, their delivery processes. There's no such thing as something that's purely vanilla. So one of the things that we recognize is that we were really applying that same sort of customized approach and kind of investment in sales to the enterprises as well as the SMBs. And so one of our big learnings was you actually have to size and scale the amount of investment you make from both the sales and delivery standpoint to the customer segment that you're going after.
Ray, any additional thoughts there?
Yeah, I agree with Wendy. I think, building on her point, I think you have to be deliberate in that side, because as I said, RFPs are going to come inbound. You're going to start seeing these things. And you have to have the ability to say, no, that customer is not going to be somebody I want to deal with. There are a couple of old books back, 10, 15 years ago. Jeffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm. There's early adopters, there's late majority, and there's laggards. And your early adopters are the enterprise guys that have to partner with you and be lighthouse accounts and understand where the hell you are in your journey and your ability to deliver, and know that it's going to be buggy, and know you're going to have bumps, but they're willing to partner with you through that process because they see the vision. So there are visionaries that are buying in on the early side as an enterprise account, and you have to be able to understand what that means on discounting, the level of service, how you go the extra mile. Because when you blow up and you lose an enterprise customer, and I've seen this in other companies that I've worked with, you lose it for a long time. And so that you really have to work hard and make sure you pick and choose the ones that are lighthouse, that you can get that level of partnership that both of you guys are bought into.
That's great. And one of the things you talked about is just, kind of keeping your customers happy. And we've been talking a lot about selling and how do you actually get that first foot in the door. But once you've made that sale, you have that enterprise company as a startup. How do you keep your customers happy? How do you create a success org around that as a smaller company, servicing these large enterprises? Wendy, let's start with you.
Yeah, well, I mean, success, exactly, customer success. We made the strategic decision as we started to evaluate the profile of our customers, recognizing that indeed, actually, the majority of our revenue and the majority of our customers and opportunities going forward really were in the enterprise. And so we invested ahead in customer success. There is, you don't need to have a perfect, I mean, there is, I realize there is an ROI, but the point is that before we could even see it, we invested heavily in finding the right strong on-client or onshore resources to help with that, because nothing replaces FaceTime. It doesn't matter how great your delivery teams or your support teams are abroad or wherever they may be located. There's nothing like building the customer relationship. So we've invested in that, and you know, since we invested in that approach, even in our existing accounts, we've seen 30 to 40% growth year over year consistently. So absolutely, customer success.
That's great. Max, I'm interested in your take here too. And, you know, as someone who's been at multiple companies in the ecosystem, has your approach changed at company from company, or is there a formula to kind of customer success that you would do if you started the next company?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, you know, enterprise customers are hard, enterprise sales cycles are hard, right? The good news is once you get them, like you got them, right? And it's pretty hard. You have to do something, you know, mess up pretty badly to lose an enterprise customer. And so I think focusing on customer success and I mean, that's arguably the best thing you can do. You know, they're demanding, but they usually have pretty good tolerance. Like they understand that, you know, you can crank out a feature tomorrow. Like they get that, you know. And I mean, the best example I give you is like Salesforce, right? I mean, it's a classic example of a brand backed by, you know, customer success. And you know, I was like amazed by how many customers bought my product CPQ, you know, who I honestly thought, you know, had no business buying it. Like it totally didn't work for them, right? But they bought it because that was Salesforce, right? And hey, you know, they'll make it right. Of course, eventually, you know, it will. But you know, I think just doubling down on customer success and you know, being responsive and transparent is you know, usually the best way to go that I've seen.
So I want to ask one final question of the panelists, and you before we open it up to you all for any questions from the audience. But what is, you know, we talked about lessons learned, we talked about all the things to get ready. But if there's one piece of advice that you would leave the folks in the room who are working to get into the enterprise, what would that be? Ray, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think it is about customer success and knowing that you as a CEO are going to put your integrity and job on the line when you go out and sell to those enterprise guys. If you're selling 8,500 seats to a, you know, to a company that's a $8 billion publicly traded company and it's mission critical to them, somebody's putting their job on the line and they're expecting you to do the same. So I think that's the key piece. And the other piece on the customer success side that, you know, you guys didn't mention, but is kind of buried in there. Early days, you're thinking about technical support and answering and fixing bugs. But the shift to account management and really understanding those relationships is the big shift too. One other point, good, bad, and the ugly. I'll take the ugly. I'm sure there's good and bad here too. So you guys can vie for those two roles.
Wendy, one piece of advice for our audience today looking to get into the enterprise?
Yeah, definitely. So I touched on it a little bit earlier. Is be ready. You do only kind of get that one shot, that one unfortunate lesson learned. It took us a long time to claw back and build back that trust after initially not meeting the full expectation. So customer success is a huge part of it. Enterprises are about that long-term relationship. They are not transactional. So when you start to take that approach, just exactly as Ray said, which is this is a partnership. They need to see value. You need to see value. That's really what changes the game, and not to just, you know, kind of purely go for the low-hanging fruit. You know, you need to invest. You should look at it as a longer-term sales cycle, but that's exactly it. Once you're in, and the growth is exponential. The ugly that I was starting to reference, I'll take that one, is that when you're not ready, you well, enterprises have big demands. You may be doing something mission critical for them. And that stress related to supporting and digging yourself out of the ditch, which is a situation that we found ourselves in, affects the entire organization. You get half of your management team that is all of a sudden go into the client's headquarters doing whatever they can to save that large, huge account, and it affects the rest of your customer base. So the thing about being ready, I think, is very true, because in that situation that we have been in our point in time is, the rest of your business suffers when you're not ready to deal with that level of scale.
Yeah, I mean, my piece of advice is don't rush to enterprise, right? There's a perfectly reasonable and a good way to build an excellent SaaS business without ever going into enterprise, right? But certainly, I wouldn't start there. I do think it makes for, if nothing else, a better product, when you start with SMB and mid-market customers, because again, what tends to happen at the enterprise, you just throw services at it, right? And that skews your product perspective. And I truly do believe this. It's a lot harder for somebody to go down market than for somebody to go up market, right? If your product is architected for a spaghetti of custom code and customizations and the massive services projects that enterprises typically are, it's very hard to then go down market and re-architect it. The other way is much easier, right? You're just adding more scalability, more performance. But the fundamental product architecture is in place to scale up.
Great. Well, we have about 10 minutes for questions. Any questions from the audience for our panel of experts? Mike is coming with a very interesting looking mic.
That was the mic holder's using his wine at the same time.
So can I take you back to Can I take you back to the beginning of the cycle, which is if it's an established marketplace, then you've got one set of problems. If it's not an established market, either aren't any other players, you've got another issue about how you even convince an enterprise customer that they even need you. Let me go to the established marketplace, which is where Ray talked about it. How important are the analysts, like the Gartners now? So they used to be critically important, but has that now changed? So if you've got an established category and you're not the market leader, is that still impacting you?
Great question. I think it depends on really the enterprise app that you're bringing to market. So, enterprise PLM as a category is one that's long established and has been followed by the analysts. But if you're doing something like Asana, Slack, TaskRay, other things where it's maybe a new business process that hasn't been done, I don't think the analysts help you. I think there's a lot of areas with G2 Crowd. I'll blow a kiss to Max's co-founder that's driving G2 Crowd. It's shifting. It's becoming the Yelp of reviews. So your software has to work, and you're getting reviews by people that really use the product versus the pay-to-play analyst side. So it's in a shift, and I think Gartner, Forrester, the other guys, they're buying up. The guys that are actually driving that new way of doing analyst research and buying behaviors. The last piece is you got more and more millennial buyers, or people that are in the 28 to 40 range that don't believe what analysts say, and they want to hear it from somebody that's using it.
When you're small, you ignore them. When you're big, you embrace them. That's how it goes. We dismiss them until we get acquired by Salesforce, and all of a sudden, I spend my days in analyst briefings.
Yeah, and just to kind of add on to what Ray's saying, Salesforce too, and just how we look at marketing, our lifeblood is customer stories. So whether or not you're recognized by an analyst firm or whatnot, really who's going to tell your customers or your future customers how, your product works or how it's working better than your existing customers. So if you can keep your customers happy, hone that in your marketing, tell those customer stories, it speaks for you. So if you go to any marketing event that we do, we lead with our customers for everything. So I think that helps a lot in terms of getting that credibility and recognition. I think Alex. Oh.
So you've spoken a lot about the difference between enterprise and SMB. What about a hybrid approach that maybe targets teams, and that team could be within the mid-market company or within the enterprise? There seems to be a movement in that direction. Have you seen it work, fail, get the best of both worlds or the worst of both worlds?
I mean, I guess in my experience, a team is basically a mid-market sale, right? That's like that, the dynamics and, the motion is very similar. Obviously, it's probably a more paperwork, obviously, because they're still part of a larger organization. But in terms of the sales motion and their flexibility, I guess to me, it's more of a kind of a mid-market mid-market deal?
I think it depends, again, on the product and the application, the use case. We do enterprise PLM, and we go from concept to customer, which is a whole new definition of what PLM is. So we built out 3 core sets of capabilities. We don't call them modules. We sell it all in one. And because it's SaaS-based software, we want to go wall to wall with our customers. So we go after the use cases and say, start anywhere, go anywhere. So we might start with engineering and manufacturing, and then go into product management, and then we go into the commercialization teams to help them, touch the product information. So product launch, product development is a team sport. Everybody touches it. Start anywhere, go anywhere. It's really given us an advantage, because then you can find multiple economic buyers that will drive the virality inside if it works.
Yeah, we've been focused, I would say, on specific buyer profiles, which are the same across whether you're an SMB, mid-market, or a large enterprise. So in our space, we're working primarily with data scientists, and you can have large initiatives. We don't oftentimes get periodically we'll get big RFPs where they come and say, fill out this 100 pages of it. But oftentimes we can be at a large enterprise where it's a data scientist who's just like, I just want to check this out. I'm going to figure it out. And so being able to build basically a high integrity, really good product, that's how we've gotten into a lot of these enterprises, to where we deliver well. We're not necessarily going out there with the multi-pronged, start with X level of, buyer. It's actually been working with folks in the organization who care about our product, building that reputation through really outstanding product and delivering, and then they advocate for you. Like, all of a sudden it becomes, I found this amazing thing, like, you guys got to go check this out, and they start to sell on your behalf.
I was curious from Max about your insights around what works in an SMB medium space, like in terms of marketing. And as an entrepreneur, right, you always have that's the first question. The second question is, as an entrepreneur, you always have this notion of, hey, I'm chasing this SMB medium-sized business, but then if I get that enterprise deal, right, you can get escape velocity much faster, right? So where do you draw that confusion, and how do you, would love to know from your experience on how you solve some of those challenges.
Yeah. So, I guess when I think of SMB and enterprise, right, these are the two extremes, right? There's a whole lot of space in between that's generally called the mid-market. And that's really what we focused on. So, just for my category for CPQ, like if you're a really, really small business, you probably don't really need it. It's the sort of thing you deploy when you start scaling. So I don't have a whole lot of experience with really, really transactional side of it, right? Where, I'm guessing it's a lot of at least some of the characteristics of kind of B2C, right? The virality and just really having highly efficient, acquisition channels. But we, I think in mid-market, in the more transactional space, it's, we just really built our business kind of one customer at a time, word of mouth, and working with Salesforce account teams kind of, in the trenches, hand-to-hand combat, obviously, now there's a whole kind of ISV org to help support you, right? But ultimately, and that was the big part of our success at Steelbrick even later on was just really building relationships with individual reps, in different geographies and establishing rep-to-rep relationship. So the alliances is there, cover, right? But you still got to have a hand-to-hand combat. And so, those are some of the tactics that we found to be successful.
Hi.
Hope I answered your question.
My question is about pricing. Usually it's kind of straightforward when you are selling small, medium businesses. You're selling like 50 per user or 100 per user, something like that. When you moved into enterprise, do you feel that you have to kind of change your pricing plans? And if you straddle both small business and enterprise, how do you deal with those pricing differences? Thank you.
Yeah, I think the big thing is when you're dealing with large global enterprises and you've got couple hundred customers, and they realize you're a B-round funded company in 4 or 5 years around, they kind of take you like a boxing ring. So you're going to get beat up by the procurement. There's global procurement organizations. They're going to beat the heck out of you and say, we are your first lighthouse customer. We want a 90% discount. we'll do marketing for you. So your $120, $180 per seat, we'll pay you 30 or 20. And that you're gonna have to make those decisions as to taking those down, because it's a procurement problem on that side. You still maintain your small to medium sized customers, and you're charging them the 100, 120, whatever, and giving them 10 to 15% discounts while you go along. But you have to buy your way into the business. And one other point with that is, I don't think anybody can go into the enterprise if you're a seed or an A round funded company. You've got to have some level of momentum of viability, cash flow, sustainability, that you're going to get beat up on as well from that perspective. So you also have to look at your personal life cycle. Even though the product might be amazing, you won't be able to sustain and win those accounts until you get to a certain point in your company life cycle.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with that. At the end of the day, especially if you're doing something that's mission critical business, they want to know that you are survivable, that you are a going concern. So they will beat you up, but you wouldn't be in the ring if they didn't actually think that you could survive and sustain.
Brian.
So deploying products for SMB all the way up is radically different for each of the segments. Whereas SMB is turnkey, turn on, it just works out of the box, all the way to the expectation of millions of dollars for an implementation. It's a messy ass org, all of those pieces. How did your strategies change in working with the SI community and doing deployments yourself to now using outsourced partners?
Well, maybe I'll take this one. Yeah, so, when we were Steelbrick, nobody was really interested in working with us. That changed immediately after we got acquired. But I think it is a challenge, right? And it's one of, that's really what Ray has touched on, right? Is before you go to the enterprise, you have to make sure that you're ready. If you're a startup, you're probably not going to have, at least early on, all the GSIs falling over themselves to build a practice around your product. So you have to have that delivery capacity in house, and frankly, they demand that in a lot of cases, right? They're conditioned not to ask that from Salesforce. But when you're a startup, they want you to do your own implementations, and so you have to have the delivery capacity to deliver these projects. And as you get larger, as you obviously build a bigger brand, as you get more of a footprint in the market, then you will start building your partner ecosystem. And in our case, it was with the smaller partners that got very big now, because they kind of placed the bet on us early. Like Simplest was, I think 5 people when they started working with us. Now they're 500. But those things are going to come, but they're going to come slowly. So you have to be prepared to fill the gap in the meantime.
I think I have time for one more question. Okay.
Ultimately, this is a long-winded question, but the crux of it is, what's the overall ROI? Ray and Wendy specifically, you answered his question over here, and I don't know who it was, but you said you got to take a serious discount on some brand new customers. You said, how mission critical is it? And I think before, if I land this new customer, it's going to be marketable for me, right? So I can drive more traction through the door. Right? I get more name brand recognition, maybe call it that. I've got procurement groups are going to beat me up. I want you to stick a number to it. What's the ROI? How do you judge it the best? Am I looking at, okay, I got to take a serious discount, but I'm going to see more customers in under a year, so hey, it's worth it to me. I'm not going to see more customers until at least this time next year and then some, so it's not worth it to me. What's your biggest number that you're going to stick to that?
No, I'm going to flip it around. It's about sales capacity and sales effectivity. If you're selling 10 to 25 or 50K deals and you're trying to grow the business, how many of those do you have to do to hit, quota capacity with a guy that's got a quota of 650 or $1 million or whatever it might be? He's got to sell 40 deals to get to $1 million at 50K a piece. If you can find a guy that can sell 2 500K deals, that's your path from a growth perspective. So I don't see it as an ROI problem. I see it as building the sales team for quota capacity and efficiency as being the path and growth, and shifting from SMB and up. And so you have to be able to ratchet up for the business, to be able to build the business, get referenceability with those small 20, 40, 50K, 100K deals. There's kind of a natural step up. And then once you get there, you see that you're going to want to start chasing a blended mix.
So you're putting new value. You're putting more value in your new hires. You're putting more value in your people.
Exactly. So, quotas, on our guys are now up north of $1 million, where first couple of years they were 400 or 500K, because they wouldn't stick around if they couldn't make their numbers.
Right. You wouldn't keep them around.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, ditto. That's exactly what we did as well. We started with, transactional smaller sales quotas that were sub $1 million, and now we are in the multiples of millions for the quota carrying. So we made a transition to basically hiring only enterprise. And I mean, the point is you can have, 10,000 customers at, $10,000 a piece, or you can have like 100 and $1 million, right? I'm not sure if that math was right, but the point is,
We'll give it to you.
the point is it's worth it, and it's a different breed. I think one of our biggest pivot points was recognizing that we really had to up level our salespeople, and it was a big leap to say, wow, we're not going to pay this amount in this quota. We're going to go all the way up here to get people who can actually sell into the enterprise. So that was a conscious decision and investment we made.
Yeah, and I would just say, I think maybe to your point, right, you don't have to do it, right? I think what Ray and the point that he's making really is that you want to make sure that your go-to-market strategy is aligned to the kind of deals that you're doing, right? Because the reality is, it's not that much harder to sell, a 100K deal than it is to say a 50K deal, right? Or a 50K deal than it is to sell a 100K deal. Right. So if your sales motion is, like you're doing outbound, right? If you have these, B2B sales teams, it's a high touch sales motion, then you obviously want to do a bunch of enterprise deals because that's how you scale the business, right? But there's other ways to build a business, right? You can do 10K deals. Obviously, you're not going to have a high touch sales team to do that, but as long as your go-to-market strategy aligns to your price points, you can get there in different ways. I don't know if you guys have heard, like there's a VC out of Europe called Christoph Jans at Point 9 Capital. He has got this famous post about 5 ways to build a $100 million business. I think now it's 8 ways, but the point stands, right? Like you can get to 100 million by selling $1 million $100 customers. Obviously, that's more B2C, or you can get there by selling $100 million customers and everything in between. So either is fine, but there's different strategies, there's different approaches. What you don't want to be doing is put in place a sales motion for $100 customer and try to sell an enterprise customer, without a worse have a sales motion for for $1 million customer and try to sell 1K deals with that. That doesn't work, obviously.
All right. Well, thank you to our panelists. Let's have a big round of applause for them today. We're going to be sticking around too, so if you have any other questions, feel free to come up and enjoy the food and drinks, and we'll use the rest of the time for networking. Thank you all.